Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's SCORE Fairfield County live webinar. Today we're going to talk about the European digital privacy laws and how they will impact U.S. small businesses, and in fact already are impacting U.S. small businesses. You'll also recognize this acronym GDPR, which is everywhere in the press. I'm Steve Smith, the webinar coordinator and also a business mentor here at SCORE in Fairfield County, and I'll be your host today. Our presenters are going to be Ed Winslow and Budley Freund, and more about these gents in just a minute, but first let me give you my obligatory blast on SCORE and a couple of other news items. Many of you have been on these webinars before, so bear with me here. But SCORE is a part of the U.S. Government Small Business Administration, was founded in the 60s, and has over 300 offices throughout the United States and over 11,000 volunteers. So it's a national program. Here in Fairfield County, we have currently over 130 volunteers and growing, I might add, with various degrees of industry, process, and subject matter expertise, and we deliver into a territory that basically goes from Bridgeport down through Greenwich and up to Shelton, a series of value-added offerings, one of which is workshops and webinars, and that's where you are today. In terms of workshops, they're live, face-to-face events, usually at libraries throughout Fairfield County, sometimes other venues, but always announced on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, 1 month in advance. Webinars are also announced one month in advance via the website. We do 2 webinars per month, and this is obviously one of the webinars that you're on today on GDPR. So let me just also say that we also offer one-on-one counseling at our offices in Norwalk, 111 East Avenue, where you can bring a very specific problem that you have in either starting your business or running your business to us, and we will assign a mentor to help you in answer that question and get your business tuned up. I can't encourage you enough to go to fairfieldcounty.score.org, where you'll see the list of workshops, webinars, how to sign up to get a mentor, and other things that I just kind of call our resources, tools, and also frequently asked questions. So, if you're thinking about, well, gosh, how do I put together a P&L, you kind of like just go to the website, click a couple times, and there'll be some instructions there on how to do it, starting with the simplest and leading up to more complicated. Okay, so this is our only webinar we're going to do in August for reasons I won't go into. Everybody kind of gets that. Our next webinar is going to be on September 4th, and this will be converting website and social media visitors to customers. Look for the specifics on fairfieldcounty.score.org. That's the third time I've said our website, probably say it another 3 or 4 times. And again, just note there's no webinar on August 21st. I can see from the attendee list that several of you are return clients. And as I said before, you get a reminder on the webinar for September 4th, probably about now or very soon, and then 3 days prior, and then the morning of. I just also want to remind you, for those of you who are, in the process of maybe starting a new business, that we are having our very popular Simple Steps for Starting Your Business session. The fall session starts on September 6th at the Maron Hotel in Danbury, and there's also a Spanish speaker Simple Steps starting on 9/13 at Building 1 Community in Stanford. And again, you can find all this information and details at fairfieldcounty.score.org. Now, I know you're waiting for me to stop talking, and frankly, so am I, but I got just a few more things here. Today's webinar will end sharply at 1 o'clock. We're trying to be respectful of your time, and this is important because I always get this question. There will be a link to the recording with slides and audio available at fairfieldcounty.score.org later today. We've also now set aside time for Q&A. If you take a look at your screen, you'll find there's a chat window in the lower left-hand corner, and use that to log your questions, and we'll take the last 10 minutes of the webinar time, which would be 12:50 to 1, to answer those questions. At the conclusion of the webinar, you're going to be receiving an email asking you to evaluate the webinar. Please do that. We do actually read them and take action. Now to our speakers. Ed Winslow has actually been a webinar and workshop presenter for SCORE starting, I think, actually end of last year. He's the founder of NicheQuest Media, which is a digital marketing agency that focuses on lead generation strategies for small and mid-sized businesses. I can't think of anything more important than that, frankly, if you're starting a new business. He's provided these services to a broad range of businesses, including public companies in healthcare, real estate, and construction. Ed will be our second speaker today. Up on deck here is Bud Freund. Bud's been self-employed for 40 years. That seems hard to believe for me because he doesn't look like he's more than about 44, but that could be, maybe that's just an interpretation on my part. He graduated from Ithaca College as a photography major, really. And his clients have included, since that time, a wide range of corporate clients across an industry breadth. As the world shifted to digital, Budley's technical expertise migrated to multimedia and digital imaging, and finally small business computer support and training, which he currently is offering in Fairfield County. He's a frequent SCORE workshop webinar presenter, to say the least. He also does a lot of technical work behind this webinar program. He's a certified SCORE mentor and really a good guy. I encourage you to contact him if you've got questions on your IT, if you need some IT support. So let me stop talking, and we'll pass it on to Budley, who will get us started, and I'll be back later to kind of moderate the questions and answers. Okay, very good. Budley, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Flattery will get you everywhere. Hello, all, and thank you for joining us. We're going to spend some time talking about GDPR and the nuances thereof, and then I'm going to hand this over to Ed Winslow, who's going to hopefully help you with an explanation of how you can market within the parameters of GDPR. So, first of all, the General Data Protection Regulation came into effect on May 25th of this past year, and it is, as it says here, the use and management of personally identifiable information for anyone and everyone who is located within any of the 28 countries of the European Union. And this is the list of countries, and please note that the United Kingdom, as of the Brexit vote, will be leaving the European Union as of March 29, 2019. But until then, they are under the guides and the auspices of GDPR, and if you're doing business with people in the UK, you're going to have to follow the rules. Now, understand that GDPR wasn't something that was created overnight. It was a lengthy process with plenty of warning and lots of people trying to figure out how to make this work. And they've been at it for a while. It's not an invention that suddenly happened. Whether you're doing anything about it or not is a separate issue, but the decision to enact the law and what it would entail has been around for some time. What exactly is personally identifiable information? Well, this is a hit list of stuff, and some of the not-so-obvious items would include your social media posts, your geolocation, whether you're located in a particular country or a city, biometrics, which I found fascinating that you can be identified that way, and obviously behavioral data. Think about how many cookies you can generate with a pair of red sneakers. That's going to send up a signal flag and have people wanting to hunt you down. Now, it's important to understand that GDPR is not the law in the United States unless you as a business located in the United States are doing business with people within the European Union, any of the 28 countries. Then it is law for you. And just to clarify that, it's like a traffic light. You're driving late for work, you don't drive through the traffic light on Thursdays, and on Friday you'll stop because you've got plenty of time. There's a traffic light, you stop for it. GDPR, you're doing business in the European Union, you need to be complying with their laws. And I understand that philosophy of Jimmy Cagney in Public Enemy, come and get me, copper. I'm here in the United States, and what are you going to possibly do to me here when your law is supposed to be over there? So I'm going to show you an example, two examples actually. These are examples, I want to stress that, of both a technological door locking and of what international law can entail. These are just examples of how things work across national borders. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Great Firewall of China, which, if you haven't heard about it, it's what keeps companies like Google and Twitter out of China and allows companies like Tencent and Alibaba to be growing enormously fast and making China one of the largest marketplaces to do business, but they don't let everybody through the door. If you think that China is the only country that would be able to do that, technology allows any country or any business to lock things in or lock things out. GDPR can do the same. So that's the technology side of how these things are going to be enacted. Now, I want to show you a legal example because, again, this is international law, and the story is the following. The husband and wife went from Russia and moved into London. They decided to get divorced. The divorce case was tried in a British court. And the court determined that as settlement, the husband was going to give to the wife this $492 million yacht. Well, the husband decided that he wasn't going to give her the yacht. So the British courts notified the dry dock in Dubai that until the husband turns the keys over to the wife, the boat sits in dry dock. And as last I heard, it's still sitting there until he hands her the keys. That's international law. The other thing to bear in mind is that currently we are in this trade war that seems to be getting everybody very nervous and concerned. And when you start to think about this notion of trade wars and people doing business, and you're not going to let me do business with you, well, I'm not going to let you do business with me. And if you don't think that these trade wars are going to have an effect, I would suggest you rethink your thinking. And as part of that, again, this is an example of what's going on around the world, not just in our country. The black and white photo on the left was taken at the beginning of the 20th century when an American delegation went to China to negotiate a trade deal. These things recur on a regular basis. What's important to note is the age of the Americans and the age of the Chinese people they were speaking with at the 20th century negotiations. On the right is the recent trade negotiations that occurred, and again, just take a look at the age of the people who are doing the negotiating. The rules are changing, and I would suggest we keep that in mind. Additionally, when we have our Commerce Secretary thinking that it could be an inconvenience to protect consumers' privacy, I'm not sure we're thinking about data in a fashion that's going to be helpful. And when our Congress doesn't understand the technology that they need to write laws about, we are in a situation where there will be change, and the change has started in Europe. How quickly did the change start to come to pass? About 48 minutes after the law took effect. This gentleman, Max Schrems from Austria, filed 4 complaints, and if he wins his complaints against Google, Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, it could total $8.8 billion in fines, and we will explain how it can get so high coming up a little later on. Now, part of what my crystal ball predicts about GDPR is that you are going to start to see the equivalent of patent trolls. And I want to give you a quick explanation of what a patent troll is and then equate it back to GDPR. Let's say your business rents a copier, and you've got your XYZ copier sitting in your office, and one day you get a letter from a law firm that says, we own the patent to the Menomina switch inside the XYZ copier, and it has come to our attention that you have not paid the royalty on the Menomina switch. And if you do not send us a $500 check to resolve this issue, we are going to legally and justifiably take you to court. And while patent trolls have been tamped down to a great extent, the same situation I foresee with GDPR, where letters are going to be going out going, you know, your website doesn't comply with GDPR, and if you don't send me, I'm going to file a complaint, and this could be costly for you. So that's what I foresee happening as an unfortunate aspect of the enforcement of GDPR. So what caused it? I mean, this didn't just happen. As I said, it took 4 years to figure out. So I want to explain a few things that precipitated the enforcement and enactment of GDPR. And before I go any farther, if you look along the bottom, you will see a URL where there are 101 frequently asked questions which you are welcome to look at and share whenever you like. So, what caused GDPR? Well, the first thing that caused it is human error. People make mistakes. They click on a bad link, they get hacked, they lose data, something occurs. The difference now with GDPR is that you can't just say, oh, I'm sorry there was a problem. You as business now have a legal liability. So human error is one of the causes of GDPR. People make mistakes, but now you're accountable for them. Here's a second thing that I think is a cause of GDPR. And I've looked over these 14 impact factors that Deloitte published a couple of years ago, and the thing I haven't been able to figure out is whether you would consider education to be an above-the-surface cost or a below-the-surface cost, because Deloitte does not consider education to be an impact of a cyber attack. I would suggest to you that if you do not educate yourself in things like bad links and where they're going to take you and ransomware and two-step authentication, the possibility of another issue in your business increases exponentially. So not only human error, but education are causes of GDPR. Then we've got this thing, bad actors. It's a phrase that keeps coming up very regularly, and it does not have anything to do with Broadway, Bollywood, or Burbank. Bad actors are people, organizations, and nations that are deliberately and maliciously attacking either other businesses or other individuals, and GDPR has been put into place to try and stop that from occurring as well. Now, I want to start to talk about the misuse of data and just put this thought in the back of your mind as you go out to your various social media websites. Okay, and before we dive too deeply into the misuse of data, I want to do a quick bit of art history. For those of you who know Norman Rockwell, he was an American painter who portrayed a slice of life in the 1940s, the 1950s, and the early 1960s, and he had an enormous number of covers on the Saturday Evening Post. This image, while it looks like a Norman Rockwell, this is not a Norman Rockwell painting. This was a painting that was done by the Internet Research Agency. And now I want to give you the backstory behind this image and talk about misuse of data. So, it all starts with our friends at Facebook, where at some point in time, a couple of years ago, a fellow named Alexander Kogan, who was a professor at Cambridge University in London, as well as, I believe, University of Moscow, went to Facebook and said, I want to conduct a survey. However, not only did the survey take the information that you gave in the survey, he created something that had these APIs, Application Programming Interface. It's kind of like the old days of the switchboard where you could plug a wire into different things and you could pull different pieces of information. So the survey that Professor Kogan had created also pulled the recipient's address book, and then Professor Kogan passed on his survey to the people in the address book, and so on, and so on, and so on. Now, Professor Kogan had a relationship with a company called Cambridge Analytica, and like many other people, Facebook did not read the terms and conditions of this API that Professor Kogan had created. So just like many of us, you're in really good company. Facebook didn't do it either. So now the data from Facebook is traveling into this data churn of Cambridge Analytica, and somehow, and nobody's quite clear on the exactly how, but somehow that data got from Cambridge Analytica over to the Internet Research Agency, which was a company located in Russia, who then purchased, using rubles, advertisements on Facebook in the battleground states during the presidential elections. The data was then going into Facebook, and in real time, Cambridge Analytica was then analyzing what was going on and would then either say, we're being successful in what we're trying to accomplish or not. Now, Facebook isn't the only group that was letting data fly all over the Internet. There's a lot of other people who have been doing that as well. As you can see, Google's been fighting stuff like crazy. I'm not sure that the California Republican Party considers Nazism to be an ideology. Twitter took down 50,000 accounts that were linked to Russia after the election. This Gizmodo article, which is in a bit.ly, be careful with the small letters and capital letters, is a story of a woman down a realtor down in the South who spent around $100,000 to make an identity issue go away. And I want to share my screen right now and talk about Trudy Wade for just a moment. So we're going to, just bear with me here, and now I want to share my desktop and share. All right, let's go over here. So I want to type in here. Okay, so we're in Google right now, and you're watching, all right? And here's our friend, Trudy Wade. Now, whether this is true or not, Trudy Wade has the right to be forgotten. And if she lived in any of the 28 countries of the European Union, that is something that GDPR has as an effect. So that's what's going on. That is misuse of data. Okay? And subsequent to the misuse of data have been an enormous number of admissions to the misuse of data. So we're starting to see people clean it up, and in the case of GDPR, it's the law in Europe. And Google has been dealing with the law in Europe for quite some time. This $5.1 billion fine was levied about 2 weeks ago. It's been a regular ongoing battle in Europe, not here in the States. And if you didn't see the Wall Street Journal yesterday, after all of what has transpired with Facebook, they think it would be a great idea if banks were to give them your financial data so that they can share Facebook users with banks. You might want to suggest to your bank that you do not want Facebook to have your financial data. So, what's the effect of GDPR? Because it's already started to have effects. And thanks to one of our regular presenters, Cliff Enico, I can tell you that one of the effects of GDPR is on this website called calm, CALM.com, where you can listen to someone read in a very calm and soothing voice the GDPR law so that it can put you to sleep. That's one effect of GDPR. And having read all 88 pages of it and marked it up from a technology point of view, I can tell you that there were aspects that will put you to sleep. There are other aspects that are very specific to what you need to do, and we will get to the what you need to do. So what's going on? Well, the Chicago Tribune no longer distributes in Europe. They are owned by a company called Tronc that also coincidentally owns the Hartford Courant and the Baltimore Sun. So they're not distributing in Europe. In California, there will be a new law comparable to GDPR taking effect in 2020. The biggest difference between the California law, which will take effect, and GDPR is that in GDPR, you need to ask people to opt in. The California law requires a website to have the ability for someone to opt out. So it's a big difference between the two, but California now has a law. In Colorado, you've got to let people know about data breaches, and Fortune magazine is also not distributing in Europe because they haven't figured out how to address all of the rules. Vermont is also starting to crack down on data brokers, which are the people who in a gray area of the law are selling data, and now they must register for the ability to sell data in Vermont, first law of its kind in the States. And there are more laws coming that will address how email must be secure and privatized in Europe. Now, I want to also talk about this notion of the Internet having been the Wild West for a really long period of time, and now you're starting to see this reining in of all of this, whatever you want to do with my data, go ahead and do it. And I want to talk specifically about this article by Mr. Vaughn Nichols, where I think it would be a fairly safe bet to say that if this article were to be running on another website without credit or compensation to the author or the publisher, the author and the publisher would want to prosecute that website to the fullest extent of the law. However, when I want to do stuff on the Internet, I don't want copyright to prevent me from doing anything I want, and unfortunately, it is that George Orwell Animal Farm philosophy of I get to do this and you don't get to do that. So I think we're starting to see that we're trying to get a fair and equal balancing of what you can do and what you can't do. So what are the new rules of the road? Well, first of all, GDPR covers every country in the European Union and all of those personally identifiable pieces of information which were listed at the front of this dog and pony. You must get user consent on any advertising or any email solicitations that you do from your business outbound. And every use needs consent. Let me give you an example. If you are a furniture company and in January you're going to be doing emails on sofas, and then in February it's going to be dining room tables, you need to get permission from all of those people in your database to be able to send those out, and you would need to specify, in January, we will be sending 4 emails about sofas. Is that okay? In February, we're going to send 4 emails about dining room tables. Is that okay? And so on. Every use requires consent. In Europe, this again is not in the United States. You need to notify people within 72 hours if you have had any hack. People have the right to refuse marketing, and they have the right to tell you, you cannot sell my profile to other people. You, as the person who is the originator of the data, could tell my furniture store, I don't want you to have my data anymore. I want you to send it over to the furniture store that's in the city next door to you because he's a little more concerned with how he treats my data than you do. That is another thing about GDPR, the right to be able to move data. You need to explain what you're doing with data very, very simply. No longer can you just hire an attorney to write a big, long, fancy, multi-page document. If you can't explain it simply, you're going to be hearing complaints, and in Europe, they can be costly. 4% of your global revenue, costly, which is how Google, Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp could be paying fines up to $8.8 billion. You, as the person who has created the data, has the right to see the data that has been gathered on you. Facebook and Google allow that to happen here in the States. You can download your profiles. There was actually an article in the Times 1 or 2 months ago by Brian Chen, I believe, called I Downloaded My Facebook Profile. Wow. And he had no idea it was 500 megabytes in size, and he had no idea, I think one of the people soliciting him was called Space Jesus. You get to see that now. And as I said before, you also have the right to be forgotten if you do not want to be in the same situation as our friend Trudy Wade. Now, the data processing officer, somebody in your business whose job is to watch all of this stuff and make sure you follow the rules. To the letter of the law, and as I said, I read the document. If you have 250 employees or more, you must have a data protection officer. I have read numerous other documents where, specifically in Tech Republic, they are indicating that if a company touches 5,000 data subjects in a 12-month period, they need to have a data protection officer too. I will go on record as saying in my read of the GDPR document and in doing a PDF search of it, I could not find that 5,000 data subject statement within the law as it was written. And finally, understand that whether you have an issue in Italy or Great Britain, all of these cases would fall under a single GDPR European Union umbrella. Now, where'd my clicker go? There we go. Okay, and as it says, these aren't theoretical rights. These are the rules of the road now. So, what do you need to do to comply with the rules of the road? Well, I would suggest you look through your database, and if you find people in Europe, make your life easier. If it's not a huge chunk of your business, if you're sending 5 emails to people in Europe, you may want to take those 5 people out of your database. Vendors, if it's not a large chunk, again, if it's not a huge piece of your business, you may find it less expensive to be out of doing business in Europe than being in Europe doing business. Secondly, back up your data. I am a very big believer in this 3-2-1-1 backup. Very briefly, put your data in 3 different places, 2 different media, one of them off-site, one of them offline. You will see information for contacting me at the end of this presentation. Would be very happy to go through it with you at some other time. You need to now scrub your outbound marketing data. In the U.S., do what you want still. That's the way it goes. In Europe, you must be careful now. I would recommend cyber insurance, though having seen a presentation, I'm not sure all of the insurance companies are quite sure of what it is they need to insure or how to do the insurance. And as I said previously, you need to get permission for any use of any marketing. This is not something new and different. Having, as Steve said, been in the photography business, if I wanted to use a model or a building in an advertisement, you needed to have a model or a property release. Otherwise, the model will come back and say, I didn't give you permission to use my photograph, and you would have all kinds of legal issues. I would recommend both legal and web help if you're not sure about what you've got and where you need to go. And as said before, these data usage statements need to be incredibly simple. That is part of the, you can't bamboozle them anymore. This was from an article in the Times back in March, Thomas Friedman. We're no longer just doing business. Business is now weaving into our society, and we need to respect all of this information that we're taking and using and pushing and moving. So, to put it differently, take better care than Facebook did. And by the way, if you have not seen the Facebook YouTube video called Facing Facts, which is basically the mea culpa, boy did we blow it, that's the URL. Take a look at it. And while you're looking at it, see if you can find a fellow named Andrew Bosworth. And if you've never heard that name, you're welcome to look him up. He wrote an email back in June of 2016 called The Ugly. And if you can find him, I'd like to know that as well. In the U.S., privacy policies are changing. Facebook's got considerably larger, but they haven't had to trim it down yet. And if you did not know it, if you have people looking at your LinkedIn profile, anything in your profile can be shared, and they can take that information and move it along. When we were having a lot of the immigration issues going on, people on ICE in the government were getting their names displayed in public, and this guy is working for ICE, and he's with the people who are taking the children, and that's because in some part they had their stuff on LinkedIn and it was public information. Proceed cautiously with what you put out there. So, without further ado, now that I've scared the bejesus out of you, I want to turn the headset over to Ed so he can explain to you how you do business within these GDPR parameters. So, one moment while I hand the headset over to Ed.
Just before you do that, by the way, There's been a question that came in that maybe you ought to answer right now, or maybe actually Ed can better answer it, but it comes from Alicia, who says, back to your furniture store example, a customer in the furniture store, a customer is able to ask the store to send their data to another company? That's a question. Is a customer able to ask the store to send their data to another company? If the first furniture store obligated to send that information at their own expense, for example, if I have an email newsletter and an EU subscriber asks me to send their email address to another newsletter and unsubscribe them from mine, it's my job to send their email address? Question mark.
Yes. You as the business owner and the possessor of that data, and I'm blanking there. There are two very clearly defined people. There is the owner of the data, which could be the furniture company, and then there is the organization that is using the data. For instance, if you had hired a third party to do your newsletter. So there's a very clear demarcation between the two. And yes, you are obligated to send that email address at the request of the email address possessor to someone else. Cost of it, I'm going to hedge my answer. I'm not sure whether that is a billable fee or it is not. My suspicion, I'll say that again, my suspicion is that if they ask you to move an email to somewhere else, it doesn't cost very much to do it, and it doesn't take a whole lot of time either. You would probably be picking a fight if you wanted to send someone a bill. And with that, I'm going to pass the headset over to Ed. Hang on for just a moment, please, folks. This is your slide. You are there. Slide over this way.
We're having some sliding going on here from the presenters, so just bear with us here for a minute. Some other really good questions from Rick and Marcus, and we'll get to those afterwards, but I want to give Ed an opportunity to do his thing here. So I'm going to turn it right over to Ed now. Ed?
Yeah, hi. Bud is always a tough act to follow. He's really got his act together when it comes to presentations. And, if you're new to GDPR, if you go over to NicheQuest.com, there's a very extensive list of 101 frequently asked questions. So you can scan through that pretty quickly, and you can see the type of questions that people are asking. We do have answers, and we do have links to authoritative resources. And then very, very quickly, you'll be able to become pretty well educated about GDPR. It's still going to take a while before it really has an impact here in the United States. But I think what's interesting about GDPR is it's bringing an awareness to a change that potentially could be happening online, certainly over in the EU and maybe someday here in the United States. Right now, as marketers, any kind of business owner, we go out, we build a website, we set up a Facebook page, a YouTube channel, LinkedIn, and then we're using different traffic channels such as search engine optimization, Google AdWords, Facebook ads, to drive that traffic to either a Facebook page, a LinkedIn channel, your website, and you're hoping that when somebody comes to your website that they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to call you, or they're going to fill out a contact form and contact you that way. In the past few years, what's happened is that just having a website is just not good enough. You could rank really great on Google for a very relevant search, and somebody could click and come to your website, and you could have the information, you could have what your customer is looking for, that particular visitor that is looking for on your website, but you still might not convert. You may not get a phone call. So what's happened is that conversion tactics have become really paramount in the last few years, and there's things like sales pages, very compelling opt-in forms, chat bots. If you go over to NicheQuest.com and you're on the site for I think maybe 15 seconds, a little chat bot is going to pop up, and it's connected with the a Facebook page. And what it's doing, the intent is to get you to opt in and start a dialogue. And then once I've got that, or any business owner has that information, they can continue to market to you over and over. And so really, if you look at the Internet as a sales tool, which is really what it is in the real world, offline world, you meet somebody that you might potentially want to do business with. Typically it takes, what do they say, 7 times of contact before they trust you enough to do business with you. The Internet is the same concept. So we're using conversion tools such as chatbots and retargeting. If you don't know what retargeting is, you've probably been retargeted before when you land on a website and you see those ads follow you around, whether it's on a website like theweather.com or Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or any of various apps. Facebook also has a retargeting pixel, so you can set up a retargeting campaign on Facebook, place the Facebook pixel on your website, and when somebody is on your website and triggers that pixel, when you're on Facebook, you're going to continue to see those ads. In the GDPR world, you're going to have to, if you're going to continue to market to somebody who you've gathered their information via an opt-in form, you're using your email, or you're using ads over and over to drip on the consumer, you're going to have to get permission from them. And that becomes really difficult because most of the time, we get these, when we get email newsletters, if you look at we sort of like just delete them. We rarely, look at the unsubscribe button, which is in very small letters down at the bottom of the newsletter. But many times we would prefer to opt out. We just sort of delete the email and we move on. In the future, in the GDPR world, you're going to get the newsletter publisher is going to frequently ask you, do you want to continue to stay on our newsletter? We're going to continue to market and send things to you over and over. As soon as you are given that option, a large percentage of those who are on your newsletter list are going to opt out. So you can see what the potential problems are going to be and how you market your business. SEO is, search engine optimization is awesome because that solves that problem of because that's all inbound marketing. That's all demand-driven marketing. Somebody's doing a search, they're landing on your page, but you still have that conversion element to deal with. And in a very competitive world, if you don't have an ongoing drip campaign or some way of staying in front of that targeted audience, you're not going to get the conversion. So it does potentially have a massive impact on marketing and how we're going to market ourselves going forward if GDPR really becomes an issue here in the United States. It is a discussion. It is starting to happen a little bit, as Bud mentioned. That's really, those are really the main things. Just to reiterate, for those of you that want to learn more about conversion tactics and maybe even ask some specific questions in regards to GDPR, on September 4th, I will be giving a webinar on how you can increase the conversion, not how to drive the traffic to your website, but how you can increase the conversion on your website. And that's going to be, how do you create these ongoing drip campaigns to stay in front of your target audience? Okay. Bud just pointed out a couple things to mention here. On this slide here, you can see, down at the very bottom it says, online WordPress database. One of the risk factors that we do all face when we're using websites is when somebody does opt into your contact form. You now have their data, and if you have their name, address, phone number, you now have personal identifiable information. So one of the really important factors today is that you need to protect yourself from hacking, because if your website does get hacked, your private data that you've been collecting on your consumers can get exposed, and I've seen that happen. There was a business that a medical business who was hacked, and their consumer data was leaked onto Google, and you could search by a person's name, and their private medical data happened to be indexed on Google. So that opens up, tremendous amount of potential lawsuits. On the healthcare side, HIPAA compliance is, a big issue. So if you are taking consumer data and you do get hacked, you're at tremendous risk. Those are just two things Bud pointed out to mention before we wrap up here. There's so much to talk about in regards to this topic, because it opens up a lot. We're talking about marketing our business. So the reason why you're here listening is because you do have a website, you do have a presence online, and you're using that presence to try and generate business you're trying to get new clients for your business. And the question is, what do you do going forward to market your business if you are restricted with your outbound follow-up marketing? Any other questions that anybody?
Well, we've got some time for questions. I think Budley's going to wrap up here, and then we'll go back for questions then. While they're changing headsets again, let me just say I did get a question during Ed's discussion about how it would be to become a part of the webinar that he mentioned on September 4th about converting website visitors to customers. Again, go to fairfieldcounty.score.org and register, and that's all you need to do. And then we'll be there on September 4th, just like we were today. Now I'm going over to Budley to wrap up, and then we're going to answer Marcus's and Rick's questions, which are good ones. Just here we go. Budley, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Ed. Before we jump off of here, Ed and I have a friend named Ganilla who, if she sent out a newsletter, it is important within the newsletter to be able to tell people that they can opt out. And as stated before, every usage of an email address needs to be specified. So if I take your email, here's what I'm going to do with it. All right, we're getting close to the end, folks. Understand that our world is changing on us, and because of that, we need to be changing as well. I urge you to read. I urge you to educate yourself, be part of these discussions, ask questions, talk to other people. Anyone who's ever done a presentation knows there are three parts to it. There's the tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them, also known as the recap. So causes of GDPR, human error, data misuse, need for education, bad actors. The effects of GDPR could be very costly if you do not comply. How do you comply? By scrubbing your data and taking really, really good care of it. And as Ed said, in marketing within those parameters, SEO is a terrific solution because it's the inbound marketing that you are able to do without the solicitation request from people's emails or a way of continually poking at them. So, contact information for Ed and myself. At the bottom of the page is the URL for the 101 FAQs. You need to get a hold of SCORE. It's all here, folks, and we'll leave that up. And please fire away for questions, and if it needs to be Ed, I'll push the headset over to him, and if it's for me, I'll hold on and see if I can do my best.
All right, great. Both guys, thanks a lot. And we do have a couple questions here we're going to try to get to in the next 6 or 7 minutes here from Rick. Now, this is, I think we kind of touched on this right as you were closing up, Budley, but I'm going to read it anyway. Are established EU customers exempt from opt-in? In other words, can product updates, service updates, newsletters, etc., be sent to people who have directly purchased or registered in the past for a company's products without their separate specific opt-in to GDPR?
By my read of the rules, which changed as of May 25th of this year, whatever communication you are going to be doing will require their permission. Hypothetical. I am a software creator, and I want to notify you of a new version of my software. I would suggest to you that if you send out an email that says, we are going to provide you with updates to the software, do you want it? I'm not sure that it's marketing as much as it's a necessary component of technology to upgrade software. If a new product is, well, I've got a spray painter gun, and we now have the Model 23, this is advertising, and in that case, I would suggest to you that you must get permission from your previous client. But if it's for, as I said, this existing piece of software, and it's a matter of keeping this software up with patches and changes and revisions, I would get permission to do that ongoing. I would also make the statement somewhere in that email, we want to send this to you, very simple, and I will also cover my base by saying, check with a lawyer, because their legal interpretation on that may be different from mine. But by my read of GDPR, you want to touch a customer in the European Union, you've got to get their permission.
Okay, it sounds logical to me. What if an EU citizen that's visiting or living in the United States, do they need to be removed from our list, our service list, our listeners list to serve also? What if a EU citizen that's visiting or living in the U.S., would they need to be removed from our lists too?
It's a really interesting question and a gray area. The law specifically states EU natives. So if they are people who are born and raised in a country of the European Union, you need to address your usage of their data very specifically. However, with that said, if they have an American email address, you have now circumvented that rule because A, they're living in the U.S., and B, they have a U.S. email address. For instance, optonline.net is an American email address. Gmail.com, I would recommend consulting with an attorney on that because Gmail is global. And if it's gmail.it for Italy.com or it's gmail.uk, that's going to be very clearly defining Gmail as coming out of a country of the European Union. Gmail.com, that's U.S. You may be able to work around it in that regard.
Yeah, this is interesting because this is Steve Smith again. I actually had a GDPR event this morning. I rented a car from Eurocar, and when they treated me as if I was obviously as a European citizen. They had it all set up. They said you got to click here to go read my privacy laws. You click here and it goes to them. It says exactly what the guys have been talking about here. So not that, just for your information, I think this was Eurocar, which is obviously in a very global kind of a business. But I suspect that a lot of European companies have just decided whoever comes here, we're going to going to use these privacy laws from end to end. So,
let me expand on that, Steve, because as you know, if you've built a website, there is a cost to it. And if you decide as the builder of a website that you're going to have one website that only addresses people in the European Union, and you're going to have another website that addresses everybody else on the planet Earth, the dollars of that become incredibly high, and the administration of that becomes enormously difficult. It is considerably easier to basically throw up your hands and say, if this is the toughest law on the planet, I'm just going to follow the toughest law on the planet, and everybody on the planet gets to play in that sandbox.
Okay, good. Yeah, I agree, totally. One last question from back to Rick again. This is pretty interesting, too. Are prospects, interesting word, are prospects who pre-GDPR selected to opt in to email broadcasts considered equivalent to having opted into GDPR rules?
No. GDPR took effect on the 25th of May, and all the rules changed. So your prior prospects need to be updated to comply with the new rules. Sorry, it's everybody would like to figure out a way out of it and around it, and unfortunately, like any other law, I don't feel like paying my taxes this year. And if you don't get caught, it's going to be a terrific advantage to your balance sheet. But eventually you're going to get, if you get caught, it could be really costly. So it is just easier within the parameters of the law to comply with the regulations.
Okay, so Marcus Alexander's upset with me. I don't blame him because I didn't answer his first time he asked this question. So we're going to answer it, and then this will be the last one. Would those enforcement attempts, like the patent trolls, be a type of bribery?
I would prefer to call it more like extortion, because there is no GDPR police, quote unquote. There is a law, and there are people who are obligated to enforce the law. But if you, like today, you can get a notification from somebody claiming to be an affiliate of Microsoft who have discovered a virus on your computer, and if you call them, they will take the virus off. The fact that they created the problem that they're now going to solve. The patent trolls, GDPR trolls, not the law, the trolls. This is basically an extortion that I am envisioning. This is not happening, but like patent trolls, where people were trying to make a fast buck, I foresee that within the world of GDPR, people are going to say, if you don't pay me, I'm going to tell on you. And unfortunately, this is going to be an outcome, and now you've got GDPR police, quote unquote, not only enforcing the law, but going after the imitation GDPR police.
Okay, Budley. Good. Great. That's it. We're going to stop here, but I do want to remind everyone, and it's come up already twice, that we do have our next webinar on 9 for September 4th, and the topic is converting the website visitors to customers. Ed, who you heard a minute ago, is going to be delivering the content there. So go to fairfieldcounty.score.org, fairfieldcounty.score.org to register for that webinar. So, listen, thanks very much. On behalf of SCORE, we really want to thank everyone for attending, and a big thanks to Ed and Budley for presenting. And everybody have a nice day, and try to stay cool if you're in Fairfield County. Thank you. Bye-bye.